So table 1 here discusses who are the possible readers, who is the audience for this particular document. And they mention users, customers, system developers, testers, writers of user manuals, and project team. I am not asking you to follow this format because this could be an overkill for what we're doing here, but it's interesting to see what kind of information may be included in the functional specification. They also provide a set of references, basically the materials used in the research and where this information came from and what was used. System overview. This particular system is, it's kind of like moniker or another name for it is mobile role-playing experience. So the idea is behind what's being described over here is that there is a server or a set of servers that are running the server side of an application and maintain a game and actually a collection of games based on virtual worlds. Virtual worlds basically can be used by the game. Characters can be created in those virtual worlds, and obviously there's artificial intelligence involved on the server side, but there are also players. And players specifically are referred to as being the players that use mobile devices like smartphones or tablet devices or any other networking means to access the system, but primarily apparently focusing on the mobile phone access to the system and be able to play it, to be able to play the system. Okay, so now sometimes when I begin to read functional spec like this, you can sense that this is quite formal document. It sort of goes through the extent of these topics and subtopics and formally discussing what the system does and what the business goals are and what, it's sort of, sometimes you can have a very small idea. You may not even have enough information for all of this. But eventually, all of the functional specs do mature to become of this type of document. But oftentimes it's useful to actually look back. If I scroll all the way down here, this is sort of useful to know that typically at the end of the functional spec there will be appendices and other parts of it which would be describing the idea in a more natural way, perhaps using very informal diagrams like this one is, essentially showing relationships of main concepts. This is not UML. This is just showing us that, hey, there will be a game engine, and this like cylinder pictogram here represents that this is a server side game engine. There's a server somewhere which essentially sits there active and is listening to the connections of some sort. The connections will come in, and those connections can be coming from administrators, game masters, game creators, and players. So player obviously is someone who can join a game, create a character, and start playing a game, interacting with virtual world. Now in that virtual world there will be other players, but there also could be players and characters driven by the software, not necessarily being represented by a particular player behind it, but the player may or may not know about it, most likely not know about it because they're focusing on the aspect of the game, right? On the other hand, there also are game creators, obviously people who have additional privileges and capabilities that they can actually create a game, define what it is, specify its properties, the types of characters, the types of objects that could be used in virtual world, and day or night or whatever, define a lot of attributes. The game master, so sort of to give you like a quick overview of what's going on here, game master is basically a power player. The power player is someone who can join the game just as player joins the game, and they can actually modify the world. They have control over what's going on, right? So they know who are the players, how do the artificial intelligence driven players behave. They can add things, remove things, they can flag things, they can issue warnings and things of this nature, right? So they're basically power players. They can control what is going on, and they can potentially stop the game if necessary, if something is going terribly wrong and things like that. And then the game itself, the game obviously is controlled by the game engine, right? That makes sense. But the game engine is completely driven and based on the virtual world, which was originally defined. Then the major part of the virtual world is the character, right? So the characters can be created by the game creator, by players themselves, using particular interface to the system to create characters, and so those characters begin to interact, right? So this can be really anything. It could be a space travel, or this could be an adventure game based on characters that are sort of like a monster-based games, or just human-based, human interaction-based. So let's see. So this is an overview. Now, another very useful type of or section in this document, and oftentimes you want to get to those glossary or dictionary-like descriptions of the system, and they're typically located at the end of the document, just like this one is in section 8. Terminology and concepts, describing in plain language what is the administrator, what is the artificial intelligence player, what is a character, right? What is a client, game creator, game master. For example, game master, person monitoring a running game, controlling the NPCs, and doing the runtime manipulations of the virtual world. Now, NPC is non-player character. NPC stands for a non-player character in this particular documentation. How do I know? Well, there is, at the very end of this document, there's acronyms and abbreviations, and NPC stands for a non-player character. Basically, any character which is driven by the game engine itself, not that basically implements certain artificial intelligence functionality, and so there is no actual human behind this particular player. And player, in my understanding here, really is represented in the virtual world by a character that is given to a player. So player appears to be a character in virtual world, but behind certain characters there could be actual users using their mobile phones to drive the game, drive their actions in a game, or it could be driven by the game engine. So NPC is a very often occurring term in this particular document. They also defined sort of non-existing properties, but more of a defining terms that are called in-game and off-game. So in-game is anything that is related to a running game, and whereas off-game is everything that does not exist in or affect the virtual world, and so they make that distinction. So clearly we're getting to some details about this right here. So NPC non-player character, right? A character which is controlled by the game engine, artificial intelligence player, or it can be the game master instead of a human player. So the game master obviously is a power player, so it has all kind of advantages over everything, so they know everything, so they may want to manipulate certain characters in a certain way to affect how the game is progressing and what is really happening. So interesting ideas here. Player is like a user, a normal user, a person connecting to the game via a mobile client. A real world, anything that can be perceived and manipulated without the use of the game client exists a real world. Virtual world, anything that exists only in the system. The world that can be experienced only with MRX. It's almost like an advertisement for what they do right here. So let's see, let's save this segment.